Today is December 10th, not 1944, 2016. That was accidental, it was not intentional. Okay, so we start with homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning everybody. So can everybody see the screen, or should it be raised higher?
I'm trying to avoid the sun.
To avoid, oh I see, that sun, that sun. Yeah, unfortunately, there's no way to block out that sun. Okay, so we are continuing now with the examination of the Anguttara Nikaya, that's the numerical discourses of the Buddha, and we are doing the first chapter, the Book of Ones. And last week we did all of these suttas dealing with the factors that lead to the decline and disappearance of the Dharma, and then the corresponding factors that lead to the preservation, the longevity, the vitality of the Dhamma. And then with the next chapter, we seem to make a transition to a completely different topic. So I was looking for any connection between the chapter that we just took and then the new chapter that we're going to take. In fact, yesterday I didn't see any clear connection, but just now as I look at it on screen, I see what seems to be a connection. And the connection may be this expression for the welfare of many people, for the happiness of many people, for the good welfare and happiness of many people, of devas and human beings. And so this seems to lead into the phrase, a key phrase in the next chapter, which speaks about the one person who arises in the world for the welfare of many people, for the happiness of many people, out of compassion for the world, for the good welfare and happiness of devas and human beings. And so we could say that this expression here is the connecting link to the new chapter. And this chapter or section is called One Person, Ekaka-nipāta, and the topic of all of these suttas in this section is the Buddha himself. So the chapter, it's a kind of paean of praise to the Buddha, extolling the Buddha from different perspectives, in terms of different qualities. And so the chapter begins, the first sutta begins by saying that there is one person who arises in the world for the welfare of many people, for the happiness of many people, out of compassion for the world. This is phrase is not in the previous section, but then it echoes the previous section, for the good welfare and happiness of devas and human beings. And then it raises the question, who is that one person? And then it gives the answer, the Tathagata, the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one, the Samma Sambuddha. That is the one person who arises in the world for the welfare of many people and so on, for the good welfare and happiness of devas and human beings. And as those of us who are Westerners, when we read this statement and we see the Buddha making this statement about himself, it seems at first glance like outrageous self-praise. So we think, if one of us, I were to stand up and say, I am the foremost Dhamma teacher, the one whose Dhamma talks are unexcelled, unsurpassed, the best in all the world, everybody would think, boy, Bhante's become a hopeless egotist. And so when we read this sutta and the suttas that follow, if we're looking at it through our Western ways of thinking, we then assume or suppose, wow, the Buddha must have been the one with the most grandiose, the most inflated ego, and just a complete victim of self-overestimation. But of course, some people say that because the Buddha is praising himself here, and the Buddha is supposed to be one who's completely eliminated all defilements, including conceit and self-love, so these suttas couldn't have been spoken by the Buddha himself, but this is maybe a later generation of disciples who have formulated these suttas and then ascribed them to the Buddha because of their devotion, their faith, their love for the Buddha. Perhaps that's so, but I would look at it from a different point of view, and I would say that because the Buddha has eradicated all the defilements and all even of the subtle traces of the defilements, when he speaks like this, he's not speaking as a person. If I get up and say this, something like that, I'm speaking as a person, because I still have a sense of self. But the Buddha has completely eliminated, eradicated all sense of self. So when he makes these pronouncements, he's not speaking as a person, but in a sense you could say that this is the universe or the Dharma speaking through the Buddha. And so statements like this are not boastful talk, but rather they are statements that are coming from, you could say, from the Dharma nature itself. It's the Dharma nature, the reality of things, speaking through the Buddha, because the Buddha, with his full enlightenment, just becomes, you could say, a channel for the Dhamma nature. In fact, there are some suttas which speak about the Buddha as having become Dhamma Bhutto, one who has become the Dhamma, or one who is Dhammakayo, the embodiment of the Dhamma. So statements like this, it's not Shakyamuni, Gautama, Siddhartha Gautama speaking as such, but it is the Buddha in his Buddhahood that is making these statements. So that is the way I understand it. And so because the Buddha has eradicated every trace of self-love, of self-identification, these statements are not coming from the Buddha out of his sense of self, but they're coming in a sense as proclamations of fundamental reality, of ultimate reality. Okay, so here we have the Buddha is, in fact, he's not even saying that, if we look at the text, he's not saying, who is that one person who arises in the world for the good of many people? He doesn't say, I am that one person. But rather he says, it is the Tathagata, the Arahant, the Samma Sambuddha. And so of course we know that the Buddha himself is the Tathagata Arahat Samma Sambuddha. But here he's referring not to myself, the individual, but to the Buddha in his nature as the Tathagata Arahat Samma Sambuddho. And so here we have the Buddha using especially this word, who was brought up for question last week. Why does, I think somebody asked, why does the Buddha use this word Tathagata to refer to himself rather than saying, I am? And it's an interesting question, and this word itself, Tathagata, is almost shrouded in mystery. Nobody knows or can say exactly what the word means, apart from a verbal derivation. Literally, the word means there's an ambiguity in the word so that it can be broken up. Yeah, it can be seen as it's a compound, and as a compound, the first part is the word tatta, which is an adverb that means such, in such a way, thus, like this. And then it can be seen as conjoined either with the past participle agata, which means come, one who has come, or as conjoined with another past participle, gata, which means gone. So the word Tathagata can be seen as meaning literally either thus come or thus gone. The one who has come in such a way, or the one who has gone in such a way. So that's the literal meaning of the word. But the way the Buddha uses it, the way I see it, when the Buddha uses it, sort of the nuance that I get, that I understand, is that when the Buddha uses this word, he's not so much referring to himself as a person, as an individual, but rather I say that he's referring to himself as an archetype, as a particular type, an ideal type of person. And that is, when he's using this word, he's placing himself within the lineage of the Buddhas, the broad category of the fully enlightened Buddhas. And so we know from the texts and also from reasoning that the Buddha, Shakyamuni, Gautama Buddha, was not just one single individual who happened to achieve perfect enlightenment, but as part of it's an inherent part of the cosmic process that from time to time, Buddhas, fully enlightened ones, arise in the world, and on their own they discover the Dharma, and then they make the Dharma known to others. They expound, proclaim, teach the Dhamma, and reveal it to the world at a time when the ultimate Dharma has completely vanished, completely disappeared. And so each Buddha has that special function. They arise in the world at a time when the ultimate liberating Dharma is not known, not being disseminated and propagated. And through their own inherent wisdom, their own probing intelligence, their own determination and vows, they break through this mass of darkness that is covering the world, and then they discover the path to liberation, the Noble Eightfold Path. They follow that path, and thereby they discover the Four Noble Truths, the three characteristics, dependent origination, and then reveal these principles, expound these principles to the world so that others can follow in their footprints and attain liberation under their guidance. So when the Buddha speaks about himself as a Tathagata, then the way I understand it, he's placing himself within this lineage of perfectly enlightened ones, this lineage of the Buddhas going back through inconceivable time, each Buddha arising and fulfilling that special, unique function of a Buddha. And so because the Buddha uses this word with special reference to himself, then we find attempts being made to extract its meaning, to try to explore, to investigate, and explain the meaning of this word. And so first we have attempts even in the Sutta Pitaka to explain why the Buddha is called Tathagata. Okay, so we have one sutta. I think the sutta that treats this subject most adequately trying to get this to fill the whole page. Okay, we just have to do it this way. Okay, so here we have a sutta that comes also in the Anguttara Nikaya. Whenever possible, I try to get other suttas from the Anguttara Nikaya. So this is from the Book of Fours, Sutta number 23. So here the Buddha is saying that in this world, with its devas, Mara and Brahma, among this population, whatever is seen, heard, sensed, cognized, reached, sought after, examined by the mind, all that the Tathagata has fully understood. And the word that's translated fully understood here is abhisambuddha, which it's also the base for understanding why the Buddha is called Buddha, because he has fully understood, become fully enlightened to the nature of everything that's seen, the entire realm of visible forms, everything that's heard, everything that is sensed through the other three senses, smelling, tasting, touching, and everything that can be cognized by the mind, all the mental objects, the nature, in other words, of all the objects of experience has been fully awakened to, fully understood by the Tathagata. Therefore, he is called the Tathagata. Sounds like a very big claim. You know, even the scientists say, this much we know, and beyond that we don't know. Okay, then another statement. Why he is called the Tathagata. Whatever the Tathagata speaks, utters, or expounds in the interval between the night when he awakened to the supreme enlightenment and the night when he attains final nibbana, all that is just so and not otherwise. And I think the word just so here is tatta. In fact, we miss some implications when we rely on an English translation. Okay, this should make that clearer. Okay, so when he says between the night when he awakened and the night when he achieves final nibbana, everything that he utters, that he speaks, that he says, all of that is just so. The word just so is tattva. And you see this computer program, it thinks it's very smart. Okay, so it changes it thinks that I've made a spelling mistake. And it automatically corrects tut into that. Okay. So tattva, it's an abridgment of tatta and eva. So the Buddha is called Tathagata because whatever he says is just so. So he's one who has come just so because whatever he says is just so. Okay, then the third reason that he's called the Tathagata is as the Tathagata speaks, so he does. As he does, so he speaks. And therefore he is called the Tathagata. And when we look at the Pali, for this, it's doing something strange. Okay, let's look at it here. Okay. So when he says, as he speaks, so he does, in Pali, we could see yata is as, and tata is so, just so. So as he speaks, just so he does. Then yatakari, as he does, tatavadi, just so he speaks. So because the word tata comes in this explanation, so therefore he is called the Tathagata. Okay, then the fourth explanation I know it's doing something strange, this computer. Does anybody know how to get out of this? Close it and reopen. No. I pressed escape. I know it's doing something strange. In fact, it's deleted what I had. Okay, we just have to manage. Okay, so the next one is that in this world with its devas, Mara and Brahma, among this population with its ascetics and Brahmins, its devas and humans. The Tathagata is called the vanquisher, the unvanquished, the universal seer, the wielder of mastery. Therefore, he is called the Tathagata. I'm going to try shutting down all of the Word files. No, it's still doing the same thing.
You didn't close all the Word file. I think you have two open. Just go down. Yeah. Right click and close all. No, go down to the Word in the yes. Right click, close all windows.
But you see, the problem is, even here, it's choosing all of these files simultaneously.
Uncheck that. Okay. Just double click on one document. Oh.
I try to click one and I'm getting two. I don't want to reboot the computer, it takes too much time.
Just start Word and then file open. That should open.
Excuse me?
Just go to start the Word document with a blank document.
A blank document?
Yeah, just go to start. Okay, you don't have the icon. Just up.
No. There it goes.
You can just minimize that.
Excuse me?
You can minimize this document.
Yeah, but it's going to do the same thing. Anyway, we just have to go on. I just will avoid clicking onto the file itself. Okay, so this is a sutta. Next, I have a sutta that shows the special function of the Buddha as the one who discovers the lost path to enlightenment. And so the text says that the Buddha is saying that he's comparing himself to a man who is wandering through a forest. And then this man sees an ancient path. It was an ancient path that was traveled upon by people in the past. But now that path has fallen into a state of complete neglect. It's completely disappeared. And so this man then follows that path, and as he follows it, he sees an ancient city that was inhabited by people in the past. And then the man goes to the king or to the royal minister and asks him to revive that ancient city. And so the king or royal minister would renovate the city And then that city becomes successful and prosperous, well-populated, filled with people, attained to growth and expansion. And so the Buddha says, in the same way, he says, I saw that ancient path, that ancient road traveled by the perfectly enlightened ones of the past. And that path, of course, it's the Noble Eightfold Path. And then the Buddha says that by traveling along that path, I directly knew old age and death, and so on. These are the links in the chain of dependent origination. And so he directly knew them, and then he explained them to the monks, the nuns, the male lay followers, the female lay followers, and thus this brahmacharya has become successful and prosperous, extensive, popular, widespread, well-proclaimed among devas and humans. Okay, so these are some passages from the suttas that illustrate the nature and function of a Tathagata. But then this word Tathagata is taken up in the commentaries. And the commentaries, the Pali commentaries, offer 8 reasons why the Buddha is called the Tathagata. You know, the commentaries, in this explanation of the word Tathagata, they try to see virtually the entire Dhamma, the entire teaching, as somehow incorporated or comprised within this word Tathagata. So it's said that if one deeply and clearly understands the meaning and implications of the word Tathagata, then one understands the entire Dhamma. So the entire Dhamma is comprised, implicitly comprised in this word Tathagata. So the 8 reasons, we have 8 reasons. He's called Tathagata because he has thus come, thus gone. So those are the 2 meanings that follow directly from the meaning of the word Tathagata when we resolve that compound. But then some other explanations are given. Because he has come to the real characteristic of things, that is, tattva is real or true, lakanang is characteristic, and agato is come. Then the next explanation, because he has awakened to real dhammas as they are. So awakened to or understood is abhisambuddho, and the real dhammas are tattva dhamme, and then as they are is yatha vato. Okay, next explanation, because he is a seer of the real. Then next, because he is a speaker of the real. The 7th, because he practices what he teaches, tattva karitaya. And then the 8th, in the sense of vanquishing or overcoming. Okay, then after laying out the outline or simple explanation, the commentary goes into a detailed explanation, which I have simplified a bit here because it goes into a great deal of details. Okay, so first it raises the question, why is the Buddha called Tathagata? Because he has thus come. And then it says, because he has come in the same way that the previous perfectly enlightened Buddhas, the Buddhas of the past came, engaged in exertion for the welfare of the world. That is, the Buddhas, he mentions the 7 Buddhas that are mentioned in the suttas, Vipassi, Siki, Vesabu, Kakusanda, Konagamana, and Kassapa. So these are the the 6 Buddhas that immediately preceded the Buddha Gautama, going back 91 kalpas, 91 great aeons. And so what is meant? That he has come through the very same aspiration that these Buddhas came through. So all the Buddhas begin their career their career leading to Buddhahood as a bodhisattva or bodhisattva. And that bodhisattva career begins by making what is called the abhinihara, that is the great aspiration, the great resolution to achieve Buddhahood. In the case of the Buddha Gautama, he made that great aspiration under the 24th Buddha of antiquity, whose name was Dipankara. And at that time, the Buddha who was to become Gautama was an ascetic, a hermit named Sumedha, living in the mountains. And then he heard, when he was on his alms round, he heard that a Buddha has arisen in the world. And so he came down from his hermitage. He was excited and thrilled, even just to hear the word Buddha. And so he came down from his hermitage, and he reached the outskirts of the city just as the Buddha Dipankara and his retinue of monks were approaching the city. And he saw that the road leading to the city was muddy. And so he bowed down at the Buddha's feet, laying down in the mud, and requesting the Buddha to walk over his body so that the Buddha would not get his feet muddy. And while he was lying there, he was so impressed by the splendor of the Buddha that he made this great resolution: let me become a Buddha sometime in the future. And then the Buddha looked down at him, and he, using his psychic powers, he read the mind of the ascetic Sumedha, and he knew his resolution. And then he looked into his depths of his mind, raising the question, does he have the capacity to achieve Buddhahood? And then he saw that in the future, he would become a Buddha by the name of Gautama. And so he told the whole assembly that this humble ascetic who's bowed down at my feet will in the future become a Buddha named Gautama. And then he didn't walk over the ascetic Sumedha, but together with all of these monks, they walked along the side. They took a sort of detour, avoiding the muddy section of the road. So that was the great aspiration. And all of the Buddhas begin their career as a bodhisattva by making that great resolution at the feet of a Buddha and obtaining the prediction of future Buddhahood. And then continuing along his path in order to reach Buddhahood. I don't want the discount. To reach Buddhahood, having made that resolution, he has to fulfill what are called the 30 paramis, or 30 paramitas. There are actually, in the Theravada tradition, 10 paramitas, which are listed here. That is, giving or generosity, virtue or good conduct, renunciation, wisdom, energy, patience, truthfulness, determination, loving kindness, and equanimity. And to become an arahant, one has to practice these 10 paramitas to a certain level, a certain degree. And those are called the basic paramitas. But to achieve complete Buddhahood, one has to practice the 10 paramitas not only at the 10 basic levels, at the level of the 10 basic paramitas, but one has to go further to the 10 intermediate paramitas. These are called upaparamis, and then to the 10 ultimate or supreme paramis. So they're the same 10 paramitas, but they're practiced at different levels of intensity, involving different levels of self-sacrifice. And at the highest level, they become the parama paramis, the supreme paramitas. And when one fulfills those supreme paramitas, then one obtains the full requisites of Buddhahood. Okay, besides the 10 paramis, it's said that one has to make along the path, these are actually modes of the paramita of generosity or giving. So the 5 great relinquishings, that is, being able to relinquish one's own limbs, one's own eyes, one's wealth, as a king to give up one's kingdom. And this is a little bit the next one runs very much against the grain of our Western way, or I would say our basic human way of thinking, to be willing even to give up one's children, one's wife and children. Okay, then one has to fulfill what's called the preliminary effort, the preliminary conduct, to master the preaching of the Dharma, to practice good conduct, to practice conduct for the good of one's relatives, to practice conduct for the good of the world, and then to reach the summit in developing one's wisdom or intelligence. And so those are some of the qualities or the prerequisites that have to be fulfilled to achieve Buddhahood. And so it said that just as all of the Buddhas of the past have come in such a way, so our own Buddha, the Buddha Gautama, came in that way. So that is the Tathagata as thus come. Okay, then the next explanation of Tathagata is one who has thus gone. And so the commentary raises the question, why is he called the Tathagata? Because he has thus gone. Then the answer given is that just as all of the Buddhas of the past went in such a way, so the present Buddha went in such a way. And so how did he go? He went along abandoning sensual desire by renunciation, ill will by goodwill or benevolence, sloth and torpor by the perception of light, restlessness and remorse by non-distraction, doubt or perplexity by the defining of dhammas, of phenomena. So that is actually the overcoming of the 5 hindrances. And then the text continues, he shattered ignorance with knowledge, he dispelled discontent with joy. Okay, then he knocked away the 5 hindrances with the first jhana. Then he made applied and sustained thought subside with the second jhana. He made rapture fade away with the third jhana. He abandoned pleasure and pain with the 4th jhana. And then it continues. I didn't include all of the statement. Then it continues with how he entered into one formless attainment after another until he had mastered all of the formless meditations. So this shows the complete mastery over the attainments of samadhi. Then comes the mastery over the attainments of insight or vipassana. So he went abandoning the perception of permanence with the contemplation of impermanence, the perception of pleasure with the contemplation of suffering, the perception of self with the contemplation of non-self, delight, this worldly delight, with the contemplation of disenchantment. He abandoned lust with the contemplation of viraga, or dispassion. He abandoned the origination of dukkha with the contemplation of cessation. He abandoned grasping with the contemplation of relinquishment. So this is a standard set of 7 contemplations. Okay, then it says that he explains how the Buddha went through the 4 stages of realization, that he abandoned the 3 lower fetters with the path of stream entry. He abandoned the gross defilements of lust, hate, and delusion with the path of the once returner. He eliminated sensual lust and ill will with the path of the non-returner. And then he eradicated all the remaining defilements with the path of arahatship. So because the Buddha went in such a way, therefore he is called Tathagata. Is this getting boring? I don't know if I'm getting too technical, or should we stop? Go on? Okay. Okay, so the commentary raises the question, why is he called the Tathagata? Because he has come to the real characteristic of things, the real nature, the tattva lakkhana of phenomena. And that gives the answer. It actually goes through whole sets of different groups of phenomena, like the 4 elements, the 12 sense bases, the 12 links of dependent origination. But I've just taken as an example the 5 aggregates. So material form or rupa has the characteristic of deformation. Feeling has the characteristic of being felt. Perception has the characteristic of perceiving. The mental formations, the sankharas, have the characteristic of forming or putting together. And consciousness has the characteristic of cognizing. So all of these characteristics are real, tattva, not unreal. So because his faculty of knowledge has penetrated these characteristics of phenomena just as they are, therefore he is called the Tathagata. Okay, the 4th explanation, why is he called the Tathagata? He is called the Tathagata because he has awakened to real dhammas in accordance with actuality. So what are these real dhammas, these real principles that he has awakened to? So the commentary says they are the 4 noble truths. And it quotes a sutta that says that these 4 noble truths are real, tattani, not unreal, not vitatani, not otherwise. And so what are these Four Noble Truths? The Noble Truth of suffering, which is tattva, not vitatta, not otherwise. And so for the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, the path to the cessation of suffering, all these truths are just as they are. They are real, not unreal, not otherwise. And so the Buddha awakened to or penetrated these Four Noble Truths, and therefore he is called the Tathagata. So then the next explanation, why is he called the Tathagata? Because he is a seer of the real. Then the explanation is given quoting that sutta that I quoted just before. Oh, actually, this is the following sutta, Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Fours, number 24. In this world, together with its devas and so on, in this population with its rulers and men, whatever is seen, heard, sensed, cognized, reached, sought after, or examined by the mind, the Buddha says, that I know, that I have directly known, that I have understood. So because the Tathagata has known all of these dhammas, these spheres of experience, the seen, the heard, the sense, the cognized, therefore he is called the Tathagata. The sixth explanation comes from this sutta that I quoted just a short while ago. Why is he called the Tathagata? Because he is a speaker of the real. And so he says, from the night of his enlightenment until the night when he passes away, whatever he spoke, all that is irreproachable in meaning and phrasing, free from excess and deficiency, perfect in all its modes, crushing lust, hatred, and delusion. So all of that is real, true, not otherwise. Therefore, because he is a speaker of the real, he is called Tathagata. Okay, then the seventh explanation or reason is because he practices what he teaches. So why is he called the Tathagata? Because he practices what he teaches. So it's said that the bodily action of the Buddha conforms to his speech, and his speech conforms to his bodily action. Therefore, he is one who practices what he teaches and teaches what he practices. Then since he is of such a nature, his bodily action, it has gone thus, tathagata, proceeding in accordance with his speech, and his speech has gone thus, tathagata, proceeding in accordance with his bodily action. So therefore he is called the Tathagata. And then the eighth and final explanation, why is he called the Tathagata in the sense of vanquishing or surpassing? Then the explanation is given, whatever, from the highest realm of existence downward, from the lowest realm upward, throughout immeasurable world systems, the Tathagata surpasses all other beings in regard to his virtuous conduct, his samadhi or concentration, his wisdom or panya, his liberation, and his knowledge and vision of liberation. There is none his equal in measure. Thus he is unequaled, immeasurable, incomparable, and in this sense the Buddha is called the Tathagata. Okay, so these are the reasons, the 8 reasons why the Buddha is called the Tathagata.
Andy, is dust come and dust gone considered 2 reasons?
Yeah, we came across, those were the first 2 reasons. So why is he called the Tathagata? Because he is, actually that's the second. Why is he called the Tathagata? Because he is thus come. That's the first reason. And then the second, why is he called the Tathagata? Because he is thus gone. I'll make this file available to everybody in the class. So you don't have to write everything out, and should have said that earlier.
It's on the screen. They can rewind once I put it on YouTube.
Excuse me?
It's on the screen of
Yeah,
the YouTube.
but it's good they get the file.
Bande, one question from the internet.
Okay.
That is just need to confirm this is from the commentary.
Yeah, this is from the commentary. It comes in the commentary to the Brahmajala Sutta, the first sutta of the Digha Nikaya. But also the same explanation will come in other commentaries. Often when the word Tathagata is mentioned in the sutta, then the commentary will pick up why is he called a Tathagata, and then it presents the same eight reasons.
So actually the source is from the sutra, commentary just organize it.
The system or the group of 8 explanations is from the commentary, but the commentary supports the different reasons by quoting suttas. Okay, so that is the explanation why the Buddha is called the Tathagata. Now, before I return to the one-person file, maybe are there any questions that come up based on... Okay, first is Simon in the back.
Bande, I'm kind of feel puzzled for the first and second explanation. The first explanation, the thus come, it seems to imply that the Buddha and the Arahant seems to go from the 2 different paths. Then the second one is also saying that the Buddha has to go through the Arahant.
Okay, this is a good question. What I would say is that there are aspects in which their path is the same, and there are aspects in which the path or practice is somewhat different, in that to achieve Buddhahood, one has to accumulate a much greater, what I call it, one has to accumulate, one has to collect a much greater accumulation of the merits and practices, so that all have to practice the paramitas to develop those 10 qualities, but the Buddha has to develop them to what we call an extraordinary extent. And I think the commentary will say that to achieve the status of a great disciple of the Buddha, or a chief disciple like Sariputta, Moggallana, one has to practice the 10 paramitas for 1 incalculable period and 100,000 mahakalpas, great aeons. To become a Pacceka Buddha, that's a privately enlightened one has to practice the paramitas for 2 incalculables and 100,000 great aeons. But to become a Sammasambuddha, a fully, perfectly enlightened one has to practice the paramitas for a minimum of 4 incalculables and 100,000 great aeons. But it could be 8 incalculables or 16 incalculables. So these are measurements of cosmic time that boggle the mind. Okay, so this is the aspect where we could say that there's some uniformity between the practice of Buddhas and Arahats, but the Buddha has to undergo these practices for a much longer period of time. But then in the second explanation, the explanation of thus gone, the explanation of the path that the Buddha follows is very similar to that of those Arahats who are Ubbato Bhagavimuta, both ways liberated, who master the 8 meditative attainments and then reach Arahatship. Okay, did you have a question? Yeah, take the microphone.
Thank you. Under number 3, Awaken to Real Dhammas, you gave us the example of the 5 aggregates.
Right.
And there was something in that example, just the listing of the 5, that struck me as extraordinarily valuable for us in order to understand how to release our attachment to them. I mean, just when you said that and I was going to ask you if you could repeat that section, because you said the form was for deforming and that feelings created self. Just that moment, I felt struck with a very great truth that could lead me to further progress on my journey, and I wondered if you could repeat them.
Let's see if I could get it. Okay, why is he called the Tathagata? Okay, the 5 aggregates. Material form has the characteristic of deformation. There's a word play here that this is doing strange things today. Okay, I do it this way. Okay, the word for material form is rupa, and actually it's the suttas also that derive this from a verb rupati, which means to be worn out, to wear away, to undergo trouble or affliction. And, looking at these 2 words from a grammatical point of view, there's actually no direct connection between the word rupa and the verb rupati. The word rupa, I don't even know the etymological origins, but it's not from the verb rupati. But the commentary, I should say the suttas themselves, playfully derive the word rupa from the verb rupati, meaning to wear away, to undergo affliction or deformation. And so in my translation, to try to make a connection between the noun rupa and the verb, I translate rupa as material form and the verb as rupati, to be afflicted, to wear away. And then the sutta it raises the question, worn away, how is it worn away? It's worn away by attacks from flies, mosquitoes, hunger, thirst, sunburn, wind, contact with snakes, and so on. Okay, then perception or feeling is what is felt. Perception has the characteristic of perceiving. The mental formations, the sankharas, have the characteristic of putting together or composing. And then consciousness, vijnana, has the characteristic of vijanati, or vijanana, of knowing or cognizing. Okay, Ravi, you can take the microphone, please.
Bhante, regarding the Arahant and Pacceka Buddha and Sammasambuddha, you mentioned the time factor. You also mentioned that it's not only the time factor, but also the, shall I use the word intensity? That is, parami just might save a life of someone.
Yeah.
Second one, you save a life while endangering your own life.
Yeah.
Third one, Sammasambuddha will save a life at the expense of his own life.
Right, yeah. That's
so which means a completely different level.
Yeah.
So is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, I want to go on because I want to try to, complete this chapter today. I didn't want to go away. Okay, that's what I want. Okay, so now comes a series of suttas which again praise the Buddha in different ways. So it says that the manifestation of one person is the manifestation of great vision, the manifestation of great light, of great radiance. So these are, we don't have to specify anything, but these are just ways of extolling the Buddha as giving rise to the vision, the light, the radiance of wisdom, the manifestation of the 6 things unsurpassed. Okay, this refers to a sutta another sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya. It's the Book of Sixes. I have to take a guess what number it is. Okay, it's the Book of Sixes. I think it's number 30. Yeah, it speaks about the 6 things that are unsurpassed. The unsurpassed sight, which is said to be the sight of the Tathagata or a disciple of the Tathagata. The unsurpassed hearing, which is the hearing of the Dhamma. The unsurpassed gain, which is gaining of faith or trust in the Dhamma. The unsurpassed training, which is the training in the Dhamma. The unsurpassed service, which is service to the Buddha or to an enlightened disciple of the Buddha. And then the unsurpassed recollection, which is the recollection of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Yeah, so it's the recollection of the Tathagata or of a disciple of the Tathagata. So those are the 6 unsurpassed things, and they become available or possible because of the arising of a Buddha in the world. Okay, then comes the realization of the 4 analytical knowledges. This in Pali is called the 4 Patisambhida. Yeah, the 4 Patisambhidas. So these are special kinds of knowledges that are required by disciples, which enable one to understand the Dhamma in great depth and detail, and to expound the Dhamma with remarkable accuracy. So the 4 Patisambhidas, the 4 analytical knowledges, are the knowledge of the meaning. So when one comes across, say, a passage in a sutta, one can understand the meaning very precisely and also understand the detailed implications of the meaning. The second is called the Dhamma Patisambhida, the analytical knowledge of the doctrine. And so one knows the doctrines and can explain the particular doctrines of the teaching, again in great depth and detail. Okay, the third is called Niruti Patisambhida, which is understood to mean the analytical knowledge of language. So when one comes across passages from the text, one understands the language, one can explain the passage linguistically, grammatically, and in terms of etymology, and one understands the relations between the words. Whoops. Getting excited and losing. And then the fourth analytical knowledge is called Patibbana Patisambhida, and that is said to mean the ability to draw upon the first 3 analytical knowledges and to utilize them when expounding the Dhamma to others. And so one doesn't have to do, well, probably in the past one has done a lot of preparation, study and taking notes and memorizing in order to build up these Patisambhidas. But when one has done all of this preliminary work through the fourth analytical knowledge, one knows exactly how to draw upon the meaning, the doctrine, and the language in order to expound the Dhamma. Okay, coming back to the root text. Okay, so the manifestation of the Buddha makes possible the penetration of numerous elements. So through the teaching of the Buddha, we can understand the numerous elements of experience, the 6 sense bases, the 6 objects, the 6 types of consciousness. So those are the 18 elements, or the 6 elements, the 4 material elements, the space element, the consciousness element. So one understands all of these elements in terms of their numerical groups and then in terms of their diversity. One understands the differences between these different elements. Okay, then the manifestation, the arising of the Tathagata in the world makes possible the realization of the 4 the realization of the fruit of true knowledge and liberation, makes possible the realization of the 4 fruits of liberation, the fruit of stream entry, by which a person cuts off the 3 lowest fetters and becomes assured of final liberation in a maximum of 7 more lifetimes. The realization of the fruit of once returning, by which one weakens greed, hatred, and delusion, and will come back to the human world only one more time before making an end of suffering. The realization of the fruit of non-returning, by which one eliminates sensual desire and ill will and becomes destined for rebirth in the form realm, never coming back to the human realm. And then finally, the realization of the fruit of arahatship, by which one cuts off all of the subtle defilements and becomes assured of no rebirth in any realm of existence. In other words, the attainment of final nibbana. So all of that becomes possible through the arising of one person in the world, the Tathagata, the Arahat, the perfectly enlightened one. Okay, so it's the Tathagata that makes all of that possible, but the Tathagata delegated a great part of his teaching responsibilities to his chief disciple, who is none other than the Venerable Sariputta. So here the Buddha says, I do not see even a single person who continues to keep in motion the unsurpassed wheel of the Dhamma so effectively as Sariputta. So Sariputta was the disciple who excelled in the faculty of wisdom, in panya. So often the Buddha would just give a very short sutta, a short discourse, and then he would leave it to Sariputta to expound the Dhamma in detail. And so for this reason, the Buddha says that it's Sariputta who continues to turn the wheel of Dhamma that I set in motion. Okay, so that takes us through the chapter on one person. Maybe we should leave the questions for after the lunch. We come back for the discussion period. So let us then end the session with a sharing of the merits. So we share the merits of expounding, of teaching the Dhamma, listening to the Dhamma, to the Devas, Nagas, and the Bhutas. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanang. Akasata chabumata Deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe devanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe bhutanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe satanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya pavagopadaya avichihetato etantare satakayupapanna Rupi arupi cha sanya sanyino dukkha pamuchantu pusantu nibbutting.